What happens when you evolve faster than your world? Tesla found this out in the worst way possible, on a freezing night in January 1905, as he walked alone through the empty streets of New York, carrying in his pocket sketches of inventions that could change humanity forever, and an eviction letter on his chest. He stopped in front of a dark shop window. The reflection in the glass showed a thin man, with sunken eyes, wearing a torn coat that no longer provided any warmth. Behind him, the city lights shone like distant stars, the same electricity he had given the world, but now left it in darkness. That night, Tesla had nowhere to sleep. I didn't have any money. I had no friends. But he had something that no one else had, the ability to see the future before it existed. And that's exactly what destroyed him. 20 years earlier, Tesla was science's brightest promise. His alternating current motors revolutionized the industry. His experiments with wireless electricity defied all known laws. He spoke of free energy, of instant communication across the planet, of machines that would capture the invisible force of the universe. But while Tesla saw tomorrow, the world still lived in yesterday. He presented ideas that seemed crazy. He proposed projects that no one understood. And the further he went, the more he distanced himself from the people around him, until one day he realized he was completely alone, surrounded by a crowd that applauded him, but never understood him. "They want me to be useful, not visionary," he wrote in his diary at the time. "They want me to build lamps, not to illuminate consciences." And then the real problem began. Tesla evolved too quickly. His ideas surpassed time. His mind operated on frequencies that others could not tune into. And when you vibrate at a different frequency than the world doesn't follow you. It kicks you out. The first time Tesla felt this was during a meeting with investors in 1901. He had just built Wardenclyffe Tower, a gigantic structure designed to transmit electrical power wirelessly to anywhere on the planet. It was his masterpiece, your legacy, proof that humanity could live in harmony with the invisible forces of the universe. He walked into the room confidently, carrying detailed diagrams, precise calculations, a complete vision of Earth's energy future. The investors looked at him silently. One of them finally asked, "How are we going to charge people for this energy?" Tesla was confused. "Charge?" he repeated as if the word were strange. "We won't charge. Energy will be available to everyone, free of charge, like the air we breathe." The silence grew heavier. Another investor stood up and said coldly, "Mr. Tesla, we do not invest in charity. We invest in profit." And then they left, all, one by one, leaving Tesla alone in the empty room, holding plans for a future that no one wanted to finance. In that moment, he understood something devastating. The world doesn't reject his ideas because they're impossible. The world rejects them because they are inconvenient. In the following years, Tesla tried everything. He looked for other investors, wrote articles, he gave interviews, but the more he explained, the more people saw him as eccentric. The more he insisted, the more they called him crazy. He began to notice a cruel pattern. The same people who publicly applauded him were secretly sabotaging him. Newspapers published headlines extolling his genius, and in the following pages they ridiculed his projects. Scientists cited their discoveries in lectures, but never invited him to participate. Businessmen used his patents to enrich themselves, and then sued him for commercial incompetence. Tesla was caught in an invisible trap. He was too valuable to ignore, but too dangerous to support. And then came the final blow. In 1915, newspapers announced that Tesla and Thomas Edison would share the Nobel Prize in physics. It was the supreme recognition, redemption, proof that he wasn't crazy, that the world finally understood him. Tesla smiled for the first time in years. But then, a week later, the Swedish Academy made an unexpected announcement. The prize would not be awarded to any of them. Rumors began to circulate. It was said that Edison had refused to share the prize with Tesla. Others said that Tesla had refused to share with Edison. The truth was never clarified, but Tesla knew what had happened. They could not honor someone who threatened the entire system, because Tesla wasn't just inventing machines. He was proposing a new way of existing, a civilization based on cooperation, in competition, in abundance, not in scarcity, in free energy, not in control, and that was unacceptable. Then he did something no one expected. It stopped. It just stopped. He stopped trying to convince. He stopped seeking approval. He stopped fighting against a world that didn't want to evolve, and he began to work in secret. Because Tesla had understood something profound. When you evolve faster than the world, you cannot drag the world down with you. You need to leave seeds, and trust that one day someone will find them. But what did Tesla plant in those years of silence? And why does this still scare power structures so much to this day? The answer lies in what happened next. And if you're feeling like this story touches something inside you, subscribe to the channel. Because what comes next will change the way you view your own loneliness. Over the next 10 years, Tesla disappeared from the world. Not literally. He still walked the streets of New York, still frequented the same modest hotel where he lived, still fed the pigeons in the square every afternoon. But his public presence evaporated. He no longer gave interviews. I no longer published articles. I no longer looked for investors. To the world, Tesla had become a relic, a genius gone mad, a promise that was never fulfilled. But the truth was different. Tesla had not given up. He had just changed his strategy, because he realized something that few understand. You can't force the world to evolve, but it may leave clues for those who come later. And that's exactly what he did. In the basement of the New Yorker hotel, where he lived in a tiny room, Tesla worked alone, by candlelight and dim lamps. His hands were shaking, not with fear, but with excitement. He was developing something that not even his former colleagues could understand. They weren't just machines, they were principles. Tesla began to map what he called the invisible laws of universal resonance. He believed that everything in the universe, every atom, every thought, every emotion, vibrated at specific frequencies, and if someone managed to master these frequencies, they could literally reprogram reality. It seemed crazy, and maybe it was. But Tesla had proof. He had built small devices that, when activated, made objects levitate for seconds. He had developed equations that predicted earthquakes weeks in advance. He had even tested a machine on himself that, according to his notes, accelerated cell regeneration through electromagnetic pulses synchronized with the heart rate. But he didn't show any of this to anyone, because I knew the world wasn't ready, and he knew there were very powerful people determined to make sure he never was. Tesla's antagonist was not a person, it was an entire system. While he worked in silence, a group of industrialists, bankers, and politicians met regularly in closed rooms to discuss the Tesla problem. They didn't call him by name, just the unpredictable inventor, and their concern was clear. Tesla was an existential risk to the world economy. Because if he managed to prove that energy could be transmitted for free, the entire fuel industry would collapse. If he demonstrated that instant communication was possible without cables, telephone companies would lose billions. If he revealed that human health could be restored through frequencies, the pharmaceutical industry would be threatened. Tesla was not just a scientist, he was a threat to the established order, and they decided to neutralize it, not with violence. That would create a martyr, but with something more effective: isolation, ridicule, and oblivion. The first tactic was to destroy his reputation. Newspapers began publishing stories about Tesla's eccentricities. They said he talked to pigeons, who believed in signs from Mars, that he had lost touch with reality. None of this was a lie, but the way it was told turned scientific curiosity into madness. Tesla actually talked to pigeons, but not because he was insane. He studied patterns of animal behavior to understand navigation through magnetic fields. He truly believed he had picked up signals from other civilizations, but because his experiments with radio waves detected frequencies that no one else could measure. But the public didn't see that. The public saw a strange old man, disconnected from reality, talking to himself in the squares. And that's exactly what they wanted. The second tactic was more cruel, deleting his contributions. Science books began to remove his name. Patents were reinterpreted and credited to other inventors. Discoveries he had made decades earlier were rediscovered by younger scientists, and Tesla was never mentioned. He realized this one afternoon in 1931, while leafing through an encyclopedia in a public library. He looked for his own name in the index. It wasn't there. You searched for alternating current. The entry credited George Westinghouse. Searched for radio. The entry credited Guglielmo Marconi. Searched for electric motors. The entry mentioned several names, but not his. Tesla closed the book slowly. His hands were shaking, this time with anger. They weren't just forgetting him. They were rewriting history as if he had never existed. And at that moment, something inside him broke. Not your mind, not your determination, but your hope in the world. Tesla returned to his hotel room and locked the door. He sat on the narrow bed, looking at the walls covered in penciled equations. Decades of work, thousands of hours of thought, inventions that could have saved millions of lives. And all of this would be buried with him. He opened a drawer and took out a yellowed envelope. Inside was a letter he never sent, written years ago, addressed to no one in particular, just words that needed to come out. The letter said, "I discovered that the greatest danger of evolving too quickly is not loneliness. It is the illusion that you are alone because you failed. But the truth is different. You are alone because you succeeded. You have crossed a border that others cannot yet see. And now you live in a territory where no one speaks your language. Tesla folded the letter and put it away again. Then he did something unexpected, smiled. Because in that moment of utter desolation, Tesla had a revelation. If the world didn't want his wisdom now, he would make sure it survived for later. He didn't need to convince anyone. I didn't need to prove anything. He just needed to hide his discoveries in places where the right people, at the right time, could find them. And that's exactly what he started to do. Over the next few months, Tesla wrote hundreds of coded pages, cryptic letters, fragmented diagrams, incomplete equations. He sent everything to different addresses, museums, libraries, universities, even ordinary people he never met in person. Each piece was useless on its own, but together, they formed a complete map of his most secret discoveries. Tesla was creating a puzzle, and only those who vibrated at the same frequency would be able to put it together. But there was a problem. Someone was watching. Someone noticed what he was doing, and that someone had very different plans for Tesla's legacy. It was a rainy Tuesday in March 1937 when Tesla realized he was being followed. He left the hotel at 6 in the morning, as he did every day, to feed the pigeons in Bryant Park. But this time, when he turned the corner of 40th Street, he saw a man in a black hat standing on the other side of the street. The man did nothing. He just watched. Tesla kept walking. The man followed him. He turned onto another street. The man also doubled. Tesla stopped in front of a window, pretending to look at the products. From the reflection in the glass, he saw the man stop too, a few meters away. It wasn't paranoia, it was surveillance. Tesla didn't race, didn't confront. He just smiled slightly, because he already expected that. After all, whoever controls power never leaves threats loose. And Tesla, even forgotten and poor, was still dangerous. Not because of what he had, but from what I knew. And now finally they had realized that he was spreading this knowledge. When Tesla returned to the hotel, he found his room door ajar. He never left her like this. He entered slowly, his eyes scanning every corner. Nothing appeared to have been moved, but he knew someone had been there. He walked to the desk. The drawers were closed, but slightly misaligned. Opened the first one. The papers were out of order. Opened the second one. A notebook was missing, the one where he had written down the addresses to which he had sent his coded letters. Tesla closed his eyes and took a deep breath. They knew, but what they didn't know, and this made Tesla smile again, was that that notebook was a decoy. The real addresses were elsewhere, a place no one would ever look for, because Tesla had learned something fundamental over the years. When you evolve faster than the world, you need to think 10 steps ahead, not just from the enemy, but time. That night, Tesla did not sleep. He sat down on the only chair in the room, wrapped in a thin blanket, and began to write. Not on paper, that could be stolen. He wrote in his own mind, memorizing every detail, every coordinate, every fragment of the puzzle he had created. He knew he had little time. His health was poor. He was 81 years old, the tired body, hands shaking. But the mind, the mind was sharper than ever. Because Tesla had spent decades preparing for this moment. He wasn't just hiding his discoveries, he was creating an invisible transmission chain, a sequence of people, places, and events that would eventually connect the right fragments into the right hands. And the most brilliant thing, he didn't choose famous scientists or powerful institutions. He chose ordinary people, unknown, those that the world ignored, because it knew that only those outside the system could protect something that threatened the system. One of those people was a Cincinnati librarian named Margaret. Tesla never met her in person, but he had read an article of hers years ago about preserving ancient manuscripts, and something about the way she wrote made him feel like she understood, that it vibrated at the same frequency. So he sent her an envelope with no return address. Inside there was just a page with seemingly random numbers and symbols. No explanation, no instructions. Margaret received the envelope in 1933. She was intrigued. He kept the page in a drawer and, from time to time, took it out to observe. I never knew who sent it, but something in her knew it was important. This was the first loop. Another fragment was sent to a retired engineer in Denver. He had written a letter to Tesla decades earlier, asking about electrical resonance. Tesla never responded, until now. The engineer received a technical diagram, hand-drawn, without any words of context. He also kept it. I didn't know what it was for, but I felt that one day, someone would know. This was the second loop. A third piece was left on a park bench, inside a physics book. The person who found him was a university student who was passing by, sad, thinking about giving up his studies. He opened the book and saw the notes. He didn't understand anything, but he felt something strange, as if that were a sign. He continued studying. This was the third loop, and the fourth was the most ingenious of all. Tesla had hidden the master key the equation that connected all the fragments, in an impossible place, inside a rejected patent. In 1928, he had submitted to the United States Patent Office a design entitled Apparatus for Transmitting Electric Power Through Natural Means. It was a simplified version of his ideas about free energy. The patent was rejected for violating the laws of thermodynamics. The document was archived and forgotten. But Tesla knew that that patent did not violate any law. He just presented it incompletely, on purpose. Because I knew that if someone really understood the principles, they could fill in the gaps. And in doing so, he would discover not only how the machine worked, but where the other fragments were hidden. The patent contained coordinates, not geographic, but numerical, frequencies, dates, sequences that, if read correctly, formed addresses. This was the fourth loop, and Tesla knew it could take years, perhaps decades, for someone to figure it out. But he trusted. I trusted that at some point in the future, someone vibrating at the same frequency would find that forgotten document and understand. But as Tesla built his invisible network of knowledge, those watching him also acted. The man in the black hat was not alone. He was part of a discreet, unofficial but powerful organization that had a single purpose: to ensure that certain discoveries never reached the public. They weren't movie villains. They did not use unnecessary violence. They were efficient, methodical, and absolutely convinced that they were protecting the world from chaos, because, in their view, releasing free energy would cause economic collapse. Instant communication without control would generate anarchy. Accelerated healing technologies would destabilize governments. They believed that humanity needed to be protected from itself, and Tesla, for them, was the personification of danger. At a secret meeting in Washington, a man in a gray suit presented a report. Tesla is getting old. He's months old, maybe weeks old, but we discovered that he is distributing information. We still don't know the scope, but we need to act. Another man, sitting at the head of the table, replied calmly, "When he dies, confiscate everything, papers, documents, belongings, all, and make sure nothing gets out of our control." "What if he has already sent material to other people?" The man smiled coldly. "Then we will make sure these people never leave BAM what they have in their hands." Tesla, in his silent room, looked out the window. He knew they were coming. I knew they would try to erase everything. But I also knew it was already too late, because truth, once released into invisible frequencies, cannot be captured. She just waits. It resonates. And at the right time, in prepared minds, it awakens. Tesla picked up one last sheet of paper, wrote something short, just one sentence. "He who vibrates at the frequency of truth will eventually find others who vibrate at the same frequency, and together they will rekindle what has been extinguished." He folded the paper, put it in an envelope, and left it on the table. Then he lay down on the narrow bed, closed his eyes, and waited, not by death, but for what would come later. Tesla died alone on January 7, 1943, in room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel. The chambermaid found his body the next morning. He was lying on his back, his hands crossed over his chest, his face serene, almost smiling, as if he knew something that no one else knew. Some newspapers published brief obituaries. Eccentric inventor dies at 86. Nothing about his actual contributions. But before the body was even removed, something extraordinary happened. Less than 2 hours after confirming the death, government agents arrived at the hotel. They were men in dark suits with no visible identification, who introduced themselves as foreign property custody employees. Tesla never became naturalized. Technically, he was still a Serbian citizen, and that gave the government the perfect legal justification to confiscate everything. They entered the room while the body was still there. They opened drawers. They turned over papers. They filled boxes with notebooks, documents, technical drawings. They took everything. The chambermaid tried to protest, but one of the agents responded coldly. "Superior orders. Don't ask questions." Which what they didn't know was that Tesla had predicted exactly this. The notebooks in the drawers were copies, old sketches, nothing dangerous. The really important documents were no longer there. Tesla had destroyed the originals, memorized everything, and rewrote coded fragments in places that would never be searched. Tesla turned his own death into a dispersal strategy, and the government agents carried boxes of nothing relevant. But 3 days later, the turnaround came. A man named John G. Trump, an MIT engineer, was assigned to analyze the documents and determine if there was anything dangerous. He spent weeks going through everything, and then he delivered his official report. There is nothing of significant scientific value. It poses no threat. The Tesla case has been closed. But decades later, it turned out that John G. Trump had lied. He lied because he understood. Those ideas would really change the world, but they would cause economic collapse, technological wars, social chaos. John was pragmatic. He believed that humanity needed to evolve gradually. So he made a decision. He would protect the legacy not by releasing it, but by preserving it. Secretly, he made copies of key documents, saved them, and before he died in 1985, he left clues. Tesla's puzzle has gained another layer. Meanwhile, the people who received the fragments began to awaken. Margaret, the librarian, looked at that mysterious page again, and he saw a pattern. It was a ranking system. When he translated the numbers, he formed a sentence. Look for where the light bends. In Denver, the engineer had a dream about the diagram. He woke up at 3 in the morning and realized the missing lines were there, like negative spaces. When he connected the dots, they formed geographic coordinates. Wardenclyffe, the student who found the book in the square, became a teacher. In 1960, he realized that those notes were instructions for building a receiver with impossible frequencies. Wrote an article. It was rejected, but a copy reached a NASA engineer, who years later would use those principles in secret projects. So that was the real climax. Not Tesla's death, I don't confiscate it, but the silent awakening of an invisible network that began to connect across time. Because Tesla never wanted one person to change the world. He wanted the right frequency to awaken many. When you vibrate too fast for your time, you don't change the present, you plant the future. In 2023, 80 years after Tesla's death, a researcher named Daniel was digitizing old documents from the patent office. Then he found something strange, a 1928 patent submitted by Tesla, rejected, forgotten. There were notes in the margins, numbers, symbols. He enlarged the image. They weren't mistakes, they were coordinator ADAs. Daniel decoded the map, visited libraries, museums, archives. In Cincinnati, he found Margaret, now 102 years old. She still kept that mysterious page. In Denver, he received the diagram that the engineer had kept for decades. When he overlaid everything with Tesla's patent, the lines fit perfectly. All the fragments were coming together. What Tesla had hidden was a fundamental principle. Everything in the universe operates by resonance. If you tune into your frequency, you can attract or repel energies around you. It wasn't mysticism. It was pure physics, decades ahead. Daniel published his findings. I expected recognition, but the reaction was mixed. Some called it fascinating, others pseudoscience. Daniel was frustrated. Then he understood. He was living exactly what Tesla lived. At that moment, he understood the true lesson. The first years in Tesla did not fail. Success is not being understood. Success is staying true to your frequency. Tesla planted seeds that he would never see blossom. He trusted that prepared minds would find them. And he was right. Daniel left the house. He sat on a bench in the park, and he realized there are people who live in the present, and there are people who build the future. If you see things that others don't, if you vibrate differently, you are not alone. You're just early. The truth about evolving faster than the world, you will never be understood in your time. But you have two choices: giving up to fit in, or keep vibrating, and trust that the world will catch up to you. Tesla chose the second. He died poor, forgotten. But 80 years later, his ideas are being rediscovered. The truth does not die. She waits. If you feel isolated, misunderstood, it's not loneliness. It's anticipation. You are not late. You are early. Do like Tesla. Spread fragments. Trust frequency. Plant seeds. You don't have to change the world alone. Just vibrate loud enough for others to tune in. And then, together, through time, you will light what was extinguished. Tesla died alone, but he was not forgotten. He waited, and we achieved it. Now it's your turn. Will you vibrate at the frequency of the world, or at the frequency of truth? When you choose the second, the universe reorganizes itself to listen to you. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel. Share. There are others waiting to hear that they are not crazy. They're just vibrating louder.